The text message came from a number I didn't recognize. It's Marcus. I know it's been 20 years. I need to explain. Can you meet me? Desert Rose Diner. Exit 47 off I-40. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Please, Ryan. I owe you the truth. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes, reading and rereading those words. Marcus. Marcus fucking Sullivan. My best friend from boot camp. My brother in everything but blood. The guy who'd vanished without a trace 20 years ago, 3 weeks before we were supposed to deploy to Iraq together. One day he was there, joking around, talking about how we'd watch each other's backs downrange, making plans for what we'd do when we got home. The next day he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, no contact for 2 decades. The Marines listed him as UA unauthorized absence. Then eventually as a deserter when he never came back. I'd spent years trying to find him, hired private investigators, searched social media, contacted everyone we'd known in boot camp. Nothing. It was like Marcus Sullivan had ceased to exist. Eventually I gave up, told myself he was probably dead, tried to move on with my life, but I never really did move on. The disappearance haunted me through my deployment, through my transition back to civilian life, through marriage and divorce, and the quiet, ordinary years that followed. Marcus had been the closest friend I'd ever had, and his abandonment, because that's what it felt like, abandonment had left a wound that never quite healed. And now, 20 years later, a text message, an invitation to meet, a promise of explanation. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to delete the message, block the number, let Marcus stay, disappeared. What explanation could possibly justify 20 years of silence? What truth could make it okay that he'd walked away without a word? But I went anyway. Because despite everything, despite the anger and hurt and betrayal, I needed to know, needed to understand what had happened to the brother I'd lost. The Desert Rose Diner was exactly the kind of place you'd expect from its name, weathered chrome and faded vinyl, sitting alone at a desolate highway exit in the Arizona desert. I pulled into the parking lot at 5:45, 15 minutes early, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I sat in my truck watching the entrance, waiting, my heart pounding like I was back on patrol expecting contact. At exactly 6 p.m., a battered Ford pickup pulled in and parked 3 spaces away from me. The driver sat there for a moment before getting out, and even from a distance, even after 20 years, I recognized him. Marcus, older, thinner, weathered by sun and time. He wore a faded work jacket and jeans, a baseball cap pulled low, but it was him. The way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the slight hitch in his step that had been there since he'd injured his ankle during the crucible. He saw me and froze. We stood there in the parking lot, 40 feet apart, 2 men who'd once been brothers, staring at each other across a gulf of 20 years and unanswered questions. I got out of my truck slowly. Marcus didn't move, just watched me approach with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear? Shame? Relief? Maybe all 3. Ryan, he said when I was close enough to hear. His voice was rougher than I remembered, like he'd spent years not talking to anyone. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I didn't know what to say. 20 years of imagined conversations, and now that the moment was here, I was speechless. So I just stood there, looking at this ghost from my past, trying to reconcile the young Marine I'd known with the worn-out man before me. You look good, Marcus said, attempting a smile that didn't quite work. Life's been treating you okay? Don't, I finally managed. Don't make small talk. Don't pretend this is a normal reunion between old friends. You disappeared for 20 years, Marcus. 20 fucking years. So if you have something to tell me, tell me. Otherwise I'm leaving. He nodded, the failed smile disappearing. You're right. I'm sorry. Let's go inside. I'll tell you everything. I promise. We took a booth in the back corner of the diner, away from the handful of other customers. A tired waitress brought us coffee and menus, but neither of us looked at them. We just sat there, Marcus staring at his hands, me staring at Marcus, waiting. I don't know where to start, he finally said. Try the beginning. Try the day you disappeared without telling your best friend where you were going, or why. Marcus flinched at the bitterness in my voice. I didn't want to leave. I want you to know that first. Leaving you, leaving the Marines, leaving that life, it destroyed me. But I had to. I had no choice. Everyone has choices, Marcus. You chose to run. You chose to let me deploy without you. You chose 20 years of silence. You're right, I made those choices, but the reason I made them— He stopped, his hands trembling as they gripped his coffee cup. I need you to understand the situation I was in, the impossible position I found myself in, and I need you to believe that if there had been any other way, I would have taken it. Then tell me, make me understand. Marcus took a deep breath, and I could see him gathering courage the way we'd been taught in boot camp. Acknowledge the fear, accept it, and move forward anyway. 3 weeks before we were supposed to deploy, I got a call from my sister, Emily. You remember her? I did. Marcus had talked about Emily constantly during boot camp. His younger sister, still in high school, the person he was closest to in the world besides me. He'd shown me pictures. A smiling teenage girl with Marcus's same dark eyes. She was in trouble, bad trouble. She'd gotten involved with a guy, older, dangerous, a dealer who'd gotten her hooked on meth. She'd tried to leave him and he'd threatened her, said if she didn't come back he'd kill her, and he meant it. Guy had a record of violence, assault charges, the whole thing. I felt a cold weight settling in my stomach. This wasn't the story I'd expected. Emily called me from a gas station bathroom. She was hiding, terrified, begging me to help her. Said mom was too weak to stand up to this guy. Said she had nowhere else to turn. Said I was the only one who could save her. Marcus's voice cracked. She was 17 years old, Ryan, my baby sister, and she was in danger. You could have told me. We could have figured something out together. Gone to the authorities, reported this guy. I tried that first, called the police in her town, explained the situation. They said without evidence of an immediate threat, there was nothing they could do. Said she should get a restraining order, but those take time, and this guy wasn't the type to respect a piece of paper. I called my CO, tried to get emergency leave. He said no, we were 3 weeks from deployment, no leave authorized except for death in the family. Marcus's hands were shaking harder now, so I had a choice. Deploy with my unit, with you, do my duty as a Marine, or go UA, find my sister, get her away from this guy before he killed her, and I chose Emily. I chose to save my sister's life even though it meant destroying my own. The anger I'd been carrying for 20 years started to crack, letting in something more complicated, understanding, maybe even sympathy. I went to her, found her hiding in a friend's basement. She was a mess, Ryan. Strung out, covered in bruises, barely recognizable as the girl in those photos I'd shown you. I got her out of there, got her into a car, and we ran. Ran where? Everywhere. Nowhere. We stayed moving for months. Never in one place more than a few days. Because this guy, Tyler, he was looking for us. Had connections, resources, the kind of people who could find someone if they wanted to badly enough, and he wanted to. Not just because Emily had left him, but because she'd taken something when she ran. What did she take? Money. A lot of money. $50,000 Tyler had been holding for his supplier. Emily grabbed it when she escaped, thought it would help us start over somewhere. What she didn't know was that the money belonged to serious people, not just local dealers but cartel connections. People who would kill over that kind of money without hesitation. The story was getting darker, more complicated than I'd imagined. So we were running not just from Tyler but from people who made Tyler look harmless by comparison. We couldn't go to the police because Emily had technically stolen the money, and I was UA from the Marines. We couldn't contact family or friends because that would put them in danger. We just had to disappear. For 20 years, I asked. You've been running for 20 years. Not the whole time. For the first 3 years, yes. We moved constantly, used fake names, worked cash jobs, lived in the shadows. Then Tyler got arrested on an unrelated charge, assault with a deadly weapon. He went away for 15 years. With him in prison, the immediate threat was gone, but we still had the cartel connection to worry about. Marcus paused to take a sip of coffee, his hands still trembling. Eventually, Emily and I settled in a small town in Montana. Remote, isolated, the kind of place where no one asks questions. We built quiet lives, kept our heads down, tried to forget we were running from anything. Emily got clean, got her GED, eventually got a nursing degree. She's married now, has 2 kids. A good life considering everything. And you? I worked construction mostly, some carpentry. Kept to myself. Never made close friends because friendships meant questions about your past, and I couldn't answer those questions honestly. Never dated seriously because relationships meant vulnerability, and I couldn't afford to be vulnerable. Just existed, day after day, carrying the weight of what I'd given up. He looked at me directly for the first time since we'd sat down. I thought about you constantly. Wondered if you'd deployed, if you'd come home, if you'd survived Iraq. Wanted to reach out so many times but couldn't because any contact could potentially expose Emily. So I stayed silent. Let you think I'd abandon you. Carried the guilt of that choice every single day. The waitress came by to refill our coffee. We sat in silence until she left, both of us processing the weight of what Marcus had revealed. Why now? I finally asked. Why contact me after 20 years? What changed? Tyler got out of prison 6 months ago, and he's looking for Emily, looking for me, looking for that money, even though it's long gone, spent on survival and Emily's rehab and just staying alive. He's been making inquiries, contacting people from back then, trying to track us down. So you're running again. Emily is. I moved her and her family to somewhere safer, somewhere Tyler won't find them. But I'm done running. I'm 43 years old, and I've spent 20 years in hiding. I'm tired, Ryan. So fucking tired. And I realized that if Tyler or his people are going to find me, if this is all going to end badly, I needed to do one thing first. What? Tell you the truth. Let you know I didn't abandon you by choice. That every day I was gone, I was thinking about the brother I'd lost. that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've regretted it every single day since. I sat back in the booth, trying to absorb everything I'd heard. 20 years of anger and betrayal and hurt, and now this explanation. This impossible situation that had no good choices, only less terrible ones. You could have told me, I said, though the accusation had less heat than before. You could have found a way to let me know you were alive, that you hadn't just bailed on our friendship. I know, and I thought about it. Wrote you letters I never sent, rehearsed phone calls I never made. But Emily's safety had to come first, and any contact with my old life risked exposing where we were. So I chose her over you, over the Marines, over everything. Do you regret it? Marcus thought about that for a long time. I regret the cost, regret what it did to you, to me, to the life I could have had. But the choice itself, no. Emily's alive, she's healthy, she has a family. If I'd deployed with you instead of going to her, she'd be dead. So as much as it's cost me, as much as I've lost, I'd make the same choice again. There was something both noble and tragic about that. He'd sacrificed everything for family, had lived in exile for 20 years to keep his sister safe. But the price had been his own life, his career, his friendships, his identity as Marcus Sullivan, Marine. What happened to the rest of our unit? Marcus asked quietly. Did everyone make it back from Iraq? This was the part I'd been dreading. The news I'd have to deliver about the men we'd trained with, the brothers who'd deployed without him. Not everyone. Jackson died in Fallujah, IED. Henderson took shrapnel to the neck in Ramadi, bled out before the corpsman could stabilize him. Chen made it home but killed himself 2 years later. PTSD, survivor's guilt, the usual demons. I watched Marcus absorb this, saw the pain in his face as he learned about friends who died while he'd been in hiding. I'm sorry, he said. God, I'm so sorry. If I'd been there, you might be dead too, or you might have saved one of them, or nothing would have changed. You can't think like that, Marcus. You made your choice. They made theirs. We all did what we thought we had to do. But I ran. They fought. There's a difference. You fought too. Just a different battle. You fought to save your sister's life. That took courage, even if it wasn't the kind of courage the Marines recognize with medals. We talked for hours after that. I told him about Iraq, about the deployment he'd missed, about coming home and trying to build a civilian life while carrying memories that wouldn't fade. He told me about those years on the run, about watching Emily recover and rebuild herself, about the quiet, lonely existence he'd maintained in Montana. As the diner started to empty and the waitress began giving us looks suggesting we should order more food or leave, Marcus pulled out an envelope from his jacket. I wrote something for you, an explanation, more detailed than what I could say here. Dates, locations, everything I went through. I want you to have it, want you to understand the whole story. I took the envelope, but didn't open it. What are you going to do now? If Tyler is looking for you, if you're done running, what's your plan? I don't have one. Maybe go to the authorities, confess everything, take whatever punishment comes from 20 years of desertion. Maybe try to disappear one more time, find a new place where Tyler can't reach me. I honestly don't know. You could fight back, report Tyler to the police, tell them about the threats, about why you ran. With what evidence? It's been 20 years. Tyler would deny everything, and I'm the one with a desertion charge hanging over me. Who's going to believe a former Marine who abandoned his unit over some violent criminal with connections? He wasn't wrong. The justice system rarely favors people who've been running for decades, regardless of their reasons. What about the Marines? What if you turned yourself in? Explained the situation. Emergency leave to protect family. Maybe they'd show leniency. Marcus laughed bitterly. I went UA 3 weeks before deployment and never came back. The Corps doesn't show leniency for that, no matter the reason. Best case scenario, I'm dishonorably discharged and lose any benefits I might have earned. Worst case, I'm prosecuted for desertion and spend time in military prison. But at least you'd be facing it instead of running. At least you'd have a chance to tell your story officially. Maybe, I've thought about it. Turning myself in, accepting the consequences, finally stopping the endless hiding. Part of me wants that closure. Part of me is just too tired to run anymore. The waitress finally came over and told us they were closing. We paid our bill and walked out into the parking lot. The sun had set completely now, leaving us under harsh parking lot lights surrounded by darkness. What do you need from me? I asked. Why did you really ask me here, Marcus? Just to explain? Or is there something more? Marcus looked at me with an expression I recognized from boot camp, the look he'd had before making difficult decisions, before facing challenges he wasn't sure he could overcome. I need to know you forgive me. Need to know that before everything falls apart, before Tyler finds me, or the Marines catch up with me, or whatever ending is coming arrives, that I made peace with the person whose friendship I valued most, that you understand why I did what I did, even if you can't agree with it. Forgiveness. After 20 years of absence, of silence, of feeling abandoned, he was asking for forgiveness. I thought about Jackson and Henderson and Chen, about the men who died while Marcus was in hiding. I thought about the anger I'd carried, the hurt, the betrayal. I thought about Emily, a 17-year-old girl whose life Marcus had saved by sacrificing his own. I don't know if I can forgive you completely, I said honestly. Part of me is still angry that you left without explanation, still hurt that you chose to cut me out of your life rather than trust me to help. But I understand why you did it. And I understand that you were in an impossible situation with no good choices. That's more than I deserve, Marcus said quietly. Probably. But you're my brother, Marcus. You were then, and somehow, despite everything, you still are now. Brothers forgive each other. Not because they deserve it, but because the bond is stronger than the betrayal. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I've missed you, Ryan. Missed having someone who understood me. Missed the friendship we had. Missed the life I could have had if circumstances had been different. I missed you too. Even when I was angry. Even when I hated you for leaving. I missed you. We stood there in the parking lot, two men in their 40s who'd once been young Marines full of idealism and brotherhood. The years between us felt both immense and insignificant. 20 years of absence, but the connection's still there, damaged but not destroyed. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. Now that you know the truth? I'm going to think about everything you've told me. Going to read your letter. And then I'm going to decide if there's a way to help you, to fix this mess you're in, or if the best I can do is just know the truth and carry it forward. I don't expect you to help. I'm not asking you to risk anything for me. Just knowing you understand, knowing we're okay again, that's enough. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. Because once you learn why your brother disappeared, why he spent 20 years in hiding to protect his sister, you can't just walk away and do nothing. Give me your number, I said. The real one, not some burner phone you'll throw away tomorrow. Give me a way to reach you. Marcus hesitated, and I understood why. For 20 years, he'd protected himself by staying disconnected. Giving me his number meant creating a link back to his hidden life, a potential vulnerability that could be exploited. Trust me, I said, like you trusted me in boot camp, like brothers trust each other. He gave me his number. I saved it in my phone under a fake name, a small concession to his caution. I need a few days, I said. Need to think about this. Talk to some people I know, see if there's any way out of this mess that doesn't end with you in prison or worse. Can you stay safe for a few days? I've stayed safe for 20 years. A few more days won't make a difference. We shook hands, and it felt like closing a circle that had been open for 2 decades. Not fixing everything, not erasing the hurt, but acknowledging that despite everything, the brotherhood we'd forged in boot camp still meant something. I watched Marcus drive away in his battered pickup, taillights disappearing into the desert darkness. Then I got in my own truck and started the long drive home, my mind racing with everything I'd learned. Marcus Sullivan, the friend I'd thought had abandoned me, had actually been living a nightmare of exile and constant vigilance. The brother I'd mourned as lost to cowardice had actually shown tremendous courage in a different form. The betrayal I'd carried for 20 years was actually a sacrifice I'd never known about. Over the next week, I made calls. I knew a lawyer who specialized in military cases. I knew a private investigator who'd helped me years ago when I'd first tried to find Marcus. I knew a retired Marine officer who might have insights into how the Corps would handle a desertion case with mitigating circumstances. And I learned some things. I learned that desertion cases from 20 years ago could sometimes be resolved without prison time if the deserter voluntarily surrendered and had compelling reasons. I learned that Emily could potentially testify to the threat they'd faced, providing context for Marcus's decision. I learned that Tyler's criminal record and recent release from prison made him a credible threat even decades later. But I also learned that there were no guarantees, that the Marines might prosecute regardless of circumstances, that even with the best legal defense, Marcus could face serious consequences for his 20 years of absence. I called Marcus on the 8th day after our meeting. I've been doing research, I told him, talking to people, exploring options, and I think there might be a path forward that doesn't end with you in prison. What kind of path? You turn yourself in to the Marines. Voluntary surrender, full cooperation, but you do it through a lawyer who specializes in military justice, someone who can present your case in the best possible light. You get Emily to provide testimony about the threat you were protecting her from. You document everything, Tyler's criminal record, the danger he posed, the impossible choice you faced, and then what? They just forgive 20 years of desertion because I had a good reason? No, but they might show leniency, might discharge you without prosecution, might recognize that you were facing a legitimate family emergency that the Corps wouldn't grant leave for. It's not guaranteed, but it's better than spending the rest of your life running. Marcus was quiet for a long time. And what about Tyler? What about the threat that's still out there? That's where the police come in. Once you've turned yourself into the Marines, once you're no longer hiding, you can file reports about Tyler's threats, get restraining orders for you and Emily, create an official paper trail that documents the danger, make it harder for him to come after you without facing consequences himself. You've really thought this through. You're my brother, Marcus. I wasn't going to just accept that you're fucked and move on. If there's a way to fix this, we'll find it, together. I could hear emotion in Marcus's voice when he responded. Why are you helping me? After everything, after 20 years of silence, why do you care? Because that's what brothers do. We fight for each other. And I failed to fight for you 20 years ago because I didn't know you needed fighting for. I'm not making that mistake again. I don't know if I can do it, Ryan. Turn myself in, face the consequences, give up the anonymity I've maintained for so long. You're already done running. You said so yourself. So now you choose how the running ends, on your terms, with legal support and a plan, or on Tyler's terms when he finds you, or on the Corps' terms when they eventually track you down. At least this way, you have some control. Marcus agreed to think about it, to meet with the lawyer I'd found, to consider the possibility that maybe after 20 years of exile, there was a way back. We met again 2 weeks later, this time at the lawyer's office. Marcus brought Emily, who was willing to testify about the situation that had driven them into hiding. The lawyer outlined a strategy: voluntary surrender, full disclosure, emphasis on the family emergency, and the legitimate threat they'd faced. I can't promise the outcome, the lawyer said, but I can promise that this approach gives you the best chance of avoiding prosecution. The Marines want closure on old desertion cases. If you come forward voluntarily, show remorse, demonstrate that you weren't running from duty but toward family protection, they might be willing to resolve this administratively rather than criminally. Marcus looked at Emily, at me, at the lawyer. Then he nodded. Okay, let's do it. Let's end this. The surrender was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Marcus would turn himself in to the nearest Marine base, accompanied by his lawyer, with documentation of everything that had led to his desertion. Emily would provide a sworn statement. The lawyer would present a case for administrative discharge rather than criminal prosecution, and I would be there, because brothers don't face their darkest moments alone. The day came. We drove to the base together, Marcus, Emily, the lawyer, and me. Marcus was quiet during the drive, his hands steady on the steering wheel but his face showing the strain of what he was about to do. Whatever happens, he said as we pulled into the base parking lot, thank you, for believing me, for helping, for being the brother I remembered even after 20 years of absence. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what you would have done for me if our situations were reversed. We walked into the base administrative building and Marcus checked in at the desk. Staff Sergeant Marcus Sullivan, reporting for voluntary surrender after 20 years of unauthorized absence. The process took hours. Paperwork, interviews, statements, documentation review. The lawyer presented Marcus's case eloquently, painting a picture of an impossible situation faced by a young Marine who'd made the only choice he could live with. Emily testified, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. She described the threats, the abuse, the desperation that had led her to call her brother for help. She acknowledged taking the money, explained that she'd been 17 and terrified and not thinking clearly. She showed the life she'd built after Marcus had saved her: nursing degree, marriage, children, evidence that his sacrifice hadn't been wasted. And I testified too, about the Marcus I'd known in boot camp, about his character and dedication, about the brother who'd never shown any sign of cowardice or unwillingness to serve, about my belief that if Marcus had abandoned his post, it was for reasons that justified such an extreme action. In the end, after 8 hours of processing and deliberation, an officer delivered the verdict. Marcus would receive an other than honorable discharge. No criminal prosecution, no prison time, but also no honor, no benefits, no recognition of service. A middle ground that acknowledged both his abandonment of duty and the circumstances that had driven it. Marcus accepted it with quiet dignity. I understand. Thank you for the consideration. We left the base as the sun was setting. Marcus no longer a deserter, but also no longer a Marine. 20 years of hiding resolved in a single day of accountability. How do you feel? I asked as we stood in the parking lot. Free, Marcus said. For the first time in 20 years, I feel free. Not proud, not vindicated, but free. The weight of running is gone. Whatever comes next, at least I won't be hiding anymore. Emily hugged her brother, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, for saving me, for sacrificing so much. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you gave up. You already are, Marcus told her. You're alive, you're healthy, you have a family. That's all I ever wanted. Over the following months, Marcus rebuilt his life. He stayed in Arizona, found work, started therapy to process 20 years of exile and the trauma that had caused it. We met regularly, rebuilding the friendship that had been interrupted for 2 decades. And we dealt with Tyler, with official reports filed and restraining orders in place, with Marcus no longer in hiding, and Emily's location protected through legal means. Tyler's threats lost their power. Eventually, his parole was revoked for violating the restraining order, and he went back to prison. Not forever, but long enough for Marcus and Emily to build stable lives that weren't defined by fear. Do you regret it? I asked Marcus one day over coffee, a year after his surrender. The choice you made 20 years ago? Everything it cost you? Marcus thought about that, his hands wrapped around his mug, his eyes distant. I regret the cost. Regret missing your wedding, your daughter's birth, all the moments of friendship we could have shared. Regret the Marines, the career I could have had, the pride I might have felt in my service. Regret 20 years of isolation and fear, and constantly looking over my shoulder. He looked at me directly. But Emily is alive. Her children exist because I made the choice I made. So do I regret the decision itself? No. I'd make it again if I had to. But I wish the world had been different. Wish there'd been a way to save my sister without abandoning my brother. Wish impossible situations came with good options instead of just less terrible ones. That's what I remember most from Marcus's story. Not the desertion or the exile or even the reunion, but the recognition that sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes you're faced with options that are all terrible, and the best you can do is choose the terrible option you can live with and carry the consequences forward. Marcus chose his sister over his career, over his friendship with me, over the life he'd planned, and he carried the weight of that choice for 20 years, knowing he'd never be forgiven by the Marines, but hoping he might be forgiven by the people who mattered most. He was right. Brothers do forgive each other. Not because anyone deserves it, but because the bond is stronger than the betrayal, and sometimes 20 years late, that forgiveness brings a brother home.